Okay. Let's see. We're getting an error. That's weird. Let's get rid of that one for a second.
I'm actually getting a sign that we're live, so I think we might be live.
Okay, we might be live. Well, let's see. Are we live?
It's telling
All
me
right.
we're live.
All right, let's do it. Well, welcome everyone. We're going to get started here in just a moment, but Dorie, I'm excited to dive in and talk about your latest book, The Long Game. Before we do that, we're going to roll a quick little video here, and then we're going to get going. All right, everyone. Well, welcome back after a little technical difficulties. I know we're a couple of minutes late here, but I'm really excited to share this message about Dorie's latest book. And I really enjoyed the book, Dorie. Again, we're talking today about the long game. I don't know if that's in camera or not. There we go. Advanced copy there, so it might look a little bit different from what you all have. There we go. That's the official version, right? So, Dorie, first of all, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's so nice to be here with you, Michael. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about a few points that I really kind of stood out to me as I went through the book. The first one that I want to kind of explore with you is this idea of short-term versus long-term thinking. For you, first of all, just kind of define what is the difference between short-term thinking and long-term thinking in the context of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, well, short-term thinking fundamentally is reactive, right? It's what's coming at me? What do we do with this? How can we navigate this? That is not a bad skill to have. That's actually a great skill to have if there's a crisis, if there's a pandemic, things like that. We need that. But the issue is that can't really be the only way that we operate, because if you want to be successful as an entrepreneur, as a consultant, ideally you have outcomes in mind. You have things you want to accomplish. And it is really hard to get all of those things to add up to a coherent destination, to get to the place you want to get to, if all you're doing is reacting to stimuli. Instead, you need long-term thinking so you can actually set a proactive vision that you're moving toward.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And in the context of today's society, where people expect instant results, do you think that people need to reset their expectations?
I think in many ways we do. Yes. It's not that people necessarily expect instant results, but the challenge that I've seen is everybody, of course, intellectually knows, like, oh, there's no such thing as overnight success. Like, we can all repeat that like a mantra. But the problem is that no one ever tells you what not overnight means. We don't know. Does it mean, okay, so it's not one blog, I get that, but is it 10? Is it 100? Is it 1,000? And that distinction of just not knowing, if we don't have the appropriate context, if we haven't done the research, if we haven't necessarily assembled a community around us of fellow practitioners who can help advise us, it can feel very very scary. It can feel like, you're sort of in this dark tunnel and you're like, oh my God, I don't know if I'm making progress. It's not working. But is it not working, or is it not working yet? And that is one of the biggest challenges that we face.
Yeah,
including cats coming across the screen.
Well, of course, because we're live, so things like that have to happen. Some technical issues and cats running across the screen, right? That's the environment we're in today. I think it's really interesting because you talk about different ideas and trying ideas, and all of us as entrepreneurs, business owners, practitioners, we are thinking about new ideas all the time. We're often trying a lot of different things. So, with regards to you're working through, you're trying something new. When, if at all, in your mind, should people give up on an idea? So let's say you're trying something, it's not working the way that you want, you're not seeing the progress that you would have expected. At what point, as you're trying that idea, have you found, or do you think that people should give up on it, or how to kind of process that? Like, should you ever give up on an idea?
Yeah, so I think that there's a couple of key points here, Michael. The first is understanding that there's a difference when we talk about an idea. There's a difference between the goal, or the strategy, and the tactics, right? So you might have something that is a very worthy goal. You want to expand into a new market, let's say, but the first way that you expand into it might not be effective. It doesn't mean that the premise is a bad premise. I mean, it's possible, but it also could mean that the tactic that you've chosen is not the correct one. So it's useful to separate those things out. I think the second piece that I've found is that something that we often fail to do, this is very very much a fact of human nature. We're so eager to dive in, to start doing the thing, that we often fail to do preliminary research. And in that preliminary research, probably the most important thing that we can learn is to really try to analyze and understand, for people who have accomplished the thing that we want to accomplish. And for most things other than space or whatever, there's somebody out there who has accomplished something similar to what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
We need to understand, what did their process look like. As much data as we can get is great, because it's true that they might be a little faster or a little slower than you, but so often we actually can make fundamental foundational errors. We might think something takes 6 months when it takes 6 years. That's an enormous difference. And so if we can understand what is the norm, we can at least calibrate so that we're not surprised if something is taking us a little longer than we anticipate. Now, I'm curious, Michael, you have a huge background in all of this, and I know that you pull together annual consulting surveys and things like this. What's your perspective on when people should or shouldn't give up an idea?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I'm a big believer in not giving up. I think it's my background in sports when I was young. Like, the idea of giving up is just unthinkable. However, in the context of business, I think very oftentimes, rather than giving up, you want to make shifts. You want to be open to taking feedback from the marketplace. Very often people will hesitate to take action because they want everything to be planned out and perfect before they actually move forward. But in my experience, you get out there, right? You don't, even without having all the information, you see how things work, and then based on that, you adjust. So I'm definitely not a fan of the idea of giving up. I think there's always a way to make something work, but too often people are too rigid in their approach, and they're not open to looking at, how did somebody else, like to your point, Dorie, which is a great one, how did somebody else achieve success in this area? And so it's very common for us in today's media to look at someone's great results and to think to ourselves like, wow, this person achieved a lot of success. And it seems like it happened quite rapidly. But when you dig a little bit deeper and kind of go back and really look at their journey, very often the success that they had took a lot longer than you might at first think. So I think that was one of the big themes that I took away from your book here.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Definitely. So another thing that I've really been trying to practice more of in my own life, and you talk about this, is like the concept of white space. Right? We all kind of, I think most people live very busy lives. We're running from like one thing to the next. Can you just kind of talk about for a moment, what is this concept of white space or creating space, and how important is it in the life of an entrepreneur? Maybe also, how do you apply it in your own life?
Yeah, definitely. So part of my framing around this actually came from some research that I did for a couple of books ago. I had a book called Standout: How to Find Your Breakthrough Idea and Build a Following Around It. And for Standout, I interviewed David Allen, the productivity expert, the creator of the Getting Things Done methodology, and he had a statement that's just stayed with me ever since then. He said, it's not that it takes a lot of time to have a great idea. It doesn't. What it takes is space. And I realized, oh, that's exactly right. Right. It's, plenty of us have had flashes of insight where a great idea comes to us in, a second. But the issue is that our minds are so cluttered sometimes with just all the things we're worried about, all the things we're behind on, all the things that we're thinking about. We never get the kind of space that we need to make those connections, or even to be, willing to engage in or ask the right questions. And so I think it's very similar with long-term thinking, right? It's not that, yes, it takes, 25 hours to do long-term thinking. It doesn't. But what it does require is just not racing around so much, not being so breathless because we feel behind. You're never going to be able to ask or answer valuable strategic questions if all you can think about is, oh my God, my inbox. So clearing
Yeah.
that out and being able to have enough space in your white space in your calendar so that you are not constantly stressed and just overburdened in that way is, I think, a necessary prerequisite. We have to fight back against that
Yeah.
tendency to overschedule in order to get where we want to go.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. Everyone joining us, thanks so much for coming on. We have a few more questions that I want to dig into here with Dorie that I really think you're going to find valuable. But if you're enjoying this, please hit the like button, share it with others that you think this might help to help us kind of get the word out here about Dorie's book. So the other, so you mentioned David Allen. The other Dave or David that you talk about in your book is Dave Crenshaw, who I had the pleasure of having on the Consulting Success podcast many years ago. And so when I read kind of your story or example of him in how he's very intentional, almost from day one in his business, creating systems that allow him to work 30-hour weeks, to take 2 months off every year. I would love to hear from you, Dorie. What do those systems look like? I mean, that to so many people, the idea of just working 30 hours a week and being able to take off 2 months every single year to spend time with family and travel and all that, like it seems almost unthinkable. Out of all the high performers or all the people that have applied these kinds of systems into their businesses and lives, could you give an example of what those systems look like kind of more practically?
Yeah, Dave is a good friend and somebody who is constantly impressive to me as somebody who really walks the talk when it comes to productivity. And so, at a very basic level, one example, of his that I share in the long game is talking about one of his strategies around how to reduce how late that we are working at night. I think this is a common problem for entrepreneurs and consultants is, sometimes it'll be, 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night if there's enough going on, and we'll just keep plowing because there's not really an off switch, and we often just keep going. And of course, we know that's not a good habit to be in, but we do it anyway.
Yeah.
What Dave suggests is that almost like resetting circadian rhythms, if you've been jet lagged or something like that, we need to, number one, create a policy for ourselves. I will not work past whatever time you set. And also that we should keep moving it back by small increments. So, even 15 minutes, right? Because it's not reasonable to assume if you've been working till 9 o'clock every night that suddenly, oh yeah, from now on, I'm going to work till 5 and that's going to, fly. You're going to give up after a day. It's just not going to be practical. But it is not impractical if, for a week or two, you say, you know what, if I'm quitting at 9, now I'm going to quit at 8:45, and you find ways to keep moving it back steadily, and you do it over time. But what Dave believes, and I think this is really true, is that with those constraints, it forces you to be more efficient. It forces you to be smarter about what you're doing and what you're not doing. And you will actually get better through putting in those constraints and that discipline.
Yeah. What one thing I think I've realized a few years back is this idea that the to-do list, everything that I have like on my plate, it'll never be finished. It's always going. And so at some point, yeah, you just kind of draw a line and go, yeah, I'm not gonna like I can't, I don't want to neglect my family, my kids, the things that I have going on, because I'm never gonna be finished everything. So the attempt to try and complete everything in one night is just, it's not possible. So that cutoff time, I think, is, and that system or that structure is a really powerful kind of way to think through it. At least I found it to be very helpful.
Yeah.
You talk about this idea of North Stars, right? I think many people are familiar with North Stars, but I'd like to just dig in a little bit more into that concept. Before we do that, just could you explain for those who might not know what a North Star is? What does that look like? What is this?
Yeah. Well, I'm not the most outdoorsy person in the world, but my understanding of a North Star, says the person who lives in Manhattan, and I'm like, yeah, can we even see stars here? I don't know, but the idea is it is what you navigate by. It's your thing on the horizon that you're looking at, and you're like, oh, that way. And I think that even if you live in a crowded city with light pollution, having our own metaphorical North Star is very important because, the idea is the route may vary. You're probably going to have detours. It might not be a really straight path. Okay, there's a creek. Okay, there's a mountain range. We got to go around, whatever. But if you at least keep looking at that North Star, you know what direction you're moving in. As long as you are directionally correct, the whole premise of the long game is things might take longer than you want them to. They might be annoying. You'll probably be annoyed on this journey. But if you keep moving in the right direction, you will get there eventually.
Yeah. We got some comments coming in here from Don Davis, just saying, great to see our faces. The Long Game is an awesome book. And then Joy Stefan saying, keep writing, Dorie. Your books have supported much of her journey. So thank you. So wonderful. Appreciate everyone jumping in here. The likes, the comments, all that is great stuff. Let's transition then to maybe one final. Well, actually, before I do that, I have one final question. I want to ask you about the North Star. I think a situation that many people find themselves in. And let's say that you've identified what your North Star is. You're clear on your destination, where you want to move towards, but then you have an opportunity. You have a potential buyer that wants to engage you in a project. Maybe they want to pay you a lot of money, but that buyer is not an ideal client. So it's some opportunity that comes your way. Deep down inside, you know that it's probably not the most aligned and not the most direct path to get you to your North Star. In that situation, what should people do?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, Michael, because this, of course, is where the rubber meets the road, right? It's like, oh, okay, we're being tempted by being lured off the path. And so, I don't want to be doctrinaire about it, actually. I think that the way that I would weigh it is ultimately, I mean, of course, what we all want to be doing is we want to be taking work that is completely aligned with the future vision of where we want to go. That being said, at different stages of your journey, what you might need is capital. And, if you say, you know what, this is going to suck, but for 3 months, I'm going to go all in. I'm going to work on this project. I'm going to make a lot of money. And it might be taking me off my course that I want to be on, but I'll be done in 3 months. I'll have all this money in my pocket. That if that actually frees you up to be more selective down the road, if that actually frees you up and gives you access to resources that you need to advance in the journey that you want, then that actually might be perfectly strategic. I think the problem is a lot of people just chase money no matter what. That becomes the goal in and of itself. But if
Yeah.
you end up deviating from the path in such a way that it is for a good reason, if it is for the reason so that you will be able to expedite your pace along the path once you return to it, then I don't really see a problem with it. Of course, you got to weigh it. I mean, is it going to be an awful client? Is it going to be an awful experience? Then maybe you wouldn't do it at any price. But
Yeah.
those are some of the things that I would think about.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice and so true that that depends on the season of where you are in kind of your business, your life, your journey. Because there is no one decision. I'm very glad to hear your stance on that, because I think very often, especially these days, you have people online just saying like this is the only way to do something. And so often I know that you and I align and kind of connect on this, that there's many ways to achieve something, but it all depends on your specific situation. So final kind of question, an area that I want to dig into here today, Dorie, and that is this concept of the 7-year horizon, which I think kind of is a beautiful connection to what we just talked about right now in terms of the North Star. You mentioned your book about Amazon, Jeff Bezos, this idea of the 7-year horizon. Could you just talk for a moment about what is the 7-year horizon and how do you feel it kind of plays into or can benefit the entrepreneurs out there in the world?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. So there is an anecdote that I shared in the long game, where Jeff Bezos, of course, the founder, now emeritus leader of Amazon, was giving an interview 10 years ago. It was 2011, with Wired magazine, and he was dissecting what he felt had contributed to Amazon's first 15 years of success. And which of course has now compounded and is even more successful 10 years down the road. But what he said, he thought the critical difference was that Amazon was willing to plan and invest on a 7-year time horizon, whereas he said the most his competitors he felt was willing to do was about 3 years. If something didn't show profits within 3 years, they didn't want to go there. They didn't want to do it. And Amazon, frankly, was just more patient with its capital. And as a result, what that enabled is for Amazon to tackle more ambitious projects that, if they were to pay off, which some of them did and some of them didn't, would be transformative. And because, sometimes the good stuff really does take a while to percolate. But so if you think about something like Amazon Web Services, if you think about something like, Amazon Prime, both of which have become true game changers and revenue drivers for the company, those were things that, were not cooked up in a year or two. Those were things that took time to really come to fruition. I mean, Amazon Prime, yes, people are paying a membership fee, but with the shipping fees, I mean, that's not like a no-brainer. There's a reason Amazon did it, and nobody else was doing it, which is that it seemed like a foolish idea if you were
Yeah.
only looking for short-term returns. What Amazon was looking for was to lock people into an ecosystem, and it was very successful in that regard. So the 7-year horizon and just being willing to kind of endure the pain of profitlessness for a while longer so that you can grow and be strategic actually can lead to dramatically different compounded results, transformative results down the road.
Yeah. Well said. Well, Dorie, I want to thank you first of all for coming on here and spending a few minutes to share some of the ideas and practices and concepts from your book. Again, everyone, highly recommend grabbing a copy if you haven't already of, let's see, there we go, The Long Game. Really enjoyed it. It's just such a good read. I think regardless of what stage you're at in your entrepreneurial or kind of business journey, there's something in this book because it really is about how you approach life, approach business, how you think about things. So it's applicable regardless of what industry you're in or what stage you're in, kind of in your business and in your life. So yeah, head on over to Amazon or wherever fine books are sold. And Dorie's also the author of many other great books. So Dorie, thanks again so much for coming on today.
Michael, thank you. It's always a treat to speak with you.